The only thing I really need to add is the separate logic supply. Here's another, here's the next class C I'm going to work on, a higher voltage. Logic supply for that is just some little simple deal like this, you know, little battery, USB charging boost circuit to recharge it. It's a little boost module like that, so that's how I drive the logic on here. It runs totally fine for a really long time. USB recharge it, so that's what I'll do with this. I decided if I really wanted to AM audio modulate this, then I would just run some type of buck converter off the coil right here. But otherwise, I just went ahead and added a little interrupter jack. We just made this switchable between continuous wave and interrupted. The final circuit here, so this is how I take it off. This 23, 24 nanofarad or so shunt cap, those do get really hot running for a while, so something I might want to replace. I ended up adding this faster diode here to help maybe drop some of that undershoot that happens when I lose EVS, and I do feel that getting a little warm over time. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Everything seems to work well, and I decided to just leave this about 50 volts max with the IR of P250. I wanted to use this sort of large flat heatsink for running really long periods. Just couldn't figure a way to sit the FET on it right, so I just threw this tiny one on there. So this is actually the heatsink, this little one here. It's got a bunch of fins on it, so it's not going to make good contact with this other one. It's more or less, this is the heatsink. It's not really transferring a lot of heat to this bigger one. This bigger one is just sort of like a platform because it was the perfect size. Let's go there. How this ended up working out was where I've got the primary now is about nearly as high as I could bring it. I could bump it up a little bit more. But what happens is if I bump it all the way down, I draw the least amount of power. If I bump it up higher, I draw more power, bigger arcs, etc. But once I get to a certain point, as I start pulling heavy loads, pulling hotter arcs, then it really pulls it out of EVS to get these massive undershoots. The voltage peaks a lot higher in the cap. So I basically tried to limit how much I crank the power with this tuning by that primary adjustment. So again, that's about as high as I'd want to bring it. Probably runs about 200 watts or more, and I could drop it down to about 180, 160 watts max, something like that, by bumping it down. But again, that sort of all depends on how I'm trying to run this. If I'm running it interrupted for a really long time, I could probably bump that up and get away with it. If I'm running continuous wave long time, I want to get near as EVS as I can. Alright, so about 12 volts, about 20 watts or so, only at 12, and crank that up again. So now can't quite bring it to 50 because then it'll pull over about 4.6 amps or so. That's hot. That is putting out a lot of heat. I feel like I could cook something on that easy. So again, that's about ZVS right there. It's pretty close. I have to load it, but if I was to drop that a little bit down more, it'll even out to the point where right as I get to 50 volts, I get my ZVS, the free air. If I bump that any higher, I start to still stay in that region where it's alright, but then when I start pulling arcs off it, if I start doing that, then it changes that waveform enough to where it really loses EVS, starts undershooting real high, and it's just not very appealing for long-term arc pulling. So whereas maybe with this tuning, I'd say doing that probably gets it to a pretty good region, drops to about half the output or half the power doing something like that. All right. So again, that's the continuous wave. All right, so I'm going to be using this main interrupter I made a while back. It's kind of dirty. It was a toss together, so I've got 3 separate outputs and a MIDI on the side. So this will run staccato, interrupted, burst mode, and then I've got MIDI. So right now it's on the regular interrupter. Got an opto isolator down there. That's what that is. That's on 19 volts. I can't see that. So then if I switch it to interrupter mode, and crank the voltage up. So that's about 50. Nothing crazy because of the tuning. Sort of adjusting the pulse width there. That's actually made for a DR SSTC, so the pulse width doesn't really get very high. trying to play too many instruments at once with this setup. I don't really still have a fine-tuned MIDI file, but if I did, it probably would sound pretty damn good. Pretty cool little setup. Heatsink is like, I can't feel any type of heat on it whatsoever after sitting here playing MIDI for a really long time. Really like that build, and hoping to get some pretty good interrupted arcs when I go to higher voltage on the other one.